The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Burnell, an Education and Training Specialist with the Institute of Child Nutrition. Welcome to Team Up Thursday's webinar on Team Up for Teamwork. The Institute of Child Nutrition, along with its Applied Research Division, has collaborated with USDA to develop Team Up for School Nutrition Success. Team Up is a unique learning experience designed to enhance the operation of school nutrition programs. It provides tailored technical assistance to programs that want to maintain a healthy environment and increase student meal program participation. As a follow-up to the Team Up Pilot Workshop in 2014, a monthly webinar series was launched. It serves as a platform to further enhance partnerships and to provide an opportunity for all school nutrition professionals to discuss issues and provide solutions and best practices used in districts in key areas. The ICN has created a website for all materials and resources specifically related to Team Up. You can find the information at www.theicn.org/teamup. Today's webinar features a panel of experts who will discuss opportunities for improving teamwork in school nutrition programs and how to best maximize work relationships. I'm pleased to introduce our panelist. Dr. Jennifer Stolman will start us off today. She is Academic Director of the William Winter Institute for Racial Reconciliation at the University of Mississippi. Next, we will hear from Heidi Kessler, who is the manager of the Cornell Center for Behavioral Economics in Child Nutrition Programs. We will also have an update from Tekla Coleman Sloan, who is a nutritionist with USDA F&S Child Nutrition Division. She will be providing an overview on recently released final regulations that affect school nutrition programs. And I will wrap it up with a summary of available resources from ICN and USDA. During today's webinar, all attendees are muted. There will be time for questions following the speakers' presentations. If you have a question, please type it in the question box on your screen. Now, Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. First, let me say it's a pleasure to get to speak to everybody today. Let me make sure I've got this right. Really what we're talking about today is how do we maximize our work relationships with folks. And first and foremost, we want to think about who we are. And it's important when we're working with folks, whether they're different from us based on race, class, or gender, or sexuality, or age, it's really important that we understand we're made up of many identities. Oftentimes, especially in the worlds that we're living in right now, we tend to reduce. So it's good to understand that we are often carrying up to 15 identities. And that can include, race, class, ethnicity, age, educational attainment, interests, and a host of other identities. So we want to think about that. When we're working with folks who seem so different from us, no single person shares the same life experiences. And we also want to understand, right, that these identities are fluid and that they intersect and they're ever-changing. So while we name each other by our first names, really what we're talking about are people who are complex individuals who have much to offer with us. So any one person can be made up of several identities at any one given time, and that's not meant to be overwhelming. That's actually meant to be comforting. In fact, we understand that it's easier when we're working with people who are more complex and different and when we don't have to reduce them to one or two identities. So what we want to think about is, why is diversity good? Why is it good to have different people around us? Diversity equals different life experiences. So when we're with people who are different from us, if they're from different ages or if they're from different economic standpoints or whatever, maybe they're not from the same state or not from the same region or not from the same country, what's good about it is there's a variety of viewpoints. And brain science tells us that the more we encounter people who are different, who have different life experiences than us, the better we are at adapting. The better we are at being more creative. The better we are at being innovative. And we also know that the more we encounter difference, the less likely we are to encounter the anxiety when we confront difference. So it becomes pretty natural. Brain science also reveals that variety is, in fact, the spice of life. It isn't just the ways in which we like a variety of entertainment or we like a variety of dress or food. We actually like a variety of people, and we want to be comfortable with that. So if you're with someone who's fundamentally a different age from you, or somebody who looks different from you, or someone who prays or loves or has a different perspective, political standpoint, we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should sort of maximize the opportunity to not only learn, but also not get our guards up. So one of the things we want to talk about, so all of us know what explicit bias is. We understand where that comes from. We understand that it's not appropriate. We know that it doesn't maximize a work relationship. But one of the things that is happening in the field of really good work environments is this concept of implicit bias. Because people have been wondering, okay, all right, we know explicit bias is bad, but why is it that when people work together, bias comes up and people who are wonderfully moral and people who are wonderful and can care about someone deeply, when they're under threat or they're under crisis, suddenly they start to not jive with each other and they might pick on some aspect of their identity that we now would view them as threatening. So what implicit bias has really, in this country, been discovered and really been promoted by people like Howard Ross and John Powell with Project Implicit out of Harvard. So what is it? Here's what we know. The brain is subjected to 11 million sensory triggers at any one time, and I know that's a fascinating number. But it's true, and just so anyone out there is wondering who counted it, it's an algorithm, it's a computer. And it's really what the body is doing. The body is making sure that you're safe. The brain has this limbic system. Many of you know what we're talking about. And since we're into nutrition and development, right, we need a healthy body. Well, the limbic system keeps you healthy. It calibrates your breathing, your respiration. It lets you know if you're safe or dangerous. Well, what we know is the brain automatically does work for you so that you don't have to process the 11 million sensory triggers. Really, at only one time, we're observing about 40 or 50. So what happens is the limbic system does the work, and that's fine when it keeps us safe. But when it isn't fine is where we find what's known as implicit bias. And implicit bias is an unconscious response, and it occurs when someone consciously rejects stereotypes and supports anti-discrimination efforts, but also holds negative associations in their mind. So that's all of us listening, right? All of us like people. All of us want to get along with people, and yet sometimes when we're under threat, our bias comes through. That's called implicit bias. It sits in the unconscious. It's through cultural conditioning. It's years of experience. I'm 48 years old. I've had 48 years of training, cultural conditioning. And so there are messages that we get from our educational spaces, from our training, from our peers, from our media that tell us who's safe and who's dangerous. And so based on visual and oral cues, individuals make automatic judgments about what category a person fits. Now, when we're getting along with everybody, everything's fine, and usually the bias doesn't come up. But when we're not getting along, then the bias comes up because our brain thinks we're trying to protect ourselves, right? And so they make these snap judgments. So things become unconstructive when the brain starts to automatically negatively categorize people and include things about people that are unproductive and often discriminatory, and that's where it interrupts our work relationships. That's where we start to have trouble. That's where we become less creative, less innovative. That's when we're less on board with everybody. So what we're talking about here, and this is why it's so liberating, because when we talk about bias and we're talking about issues of oppression, whether it's against people with age or race or class, gender, sexuality, or any form of identity, it's always been a moral blame, shame, or game knot. What we find here is if we look at it, that everybody has it, that people aren't hiding their racial prejudices or their age prejudices or any of their other sort of prejudgments. They're not hiding it. They actually don't know that they have them. So what we're trying to do is undo this, right? So what implicit bias does is through this cultural conditioning, it creates what's known as embedded stereotypes. And this is what we understand as always influencing our decision making. So it isn't right when we pop off and something comes out of our mouth or some sort of interruptive thinking happens and it interrupts our work relationship, whether it's with our colleagues or the folks that we're working with or serving. It starts to influence our decision making in a very unconscious way. And so when that happens, right, then stereotypes are created and we start to really reduce people, and then we really get into the spaces of where it's unproductive. Then what happens over time is that we start to exaggerate the differences between different groups. So we can have positive implicit, which turns into explicit bias, and we can have negative implicit, which turns into explicit bias, right? And we start to exaggerate who's safe, who's dangerous, who's smart, who's not, who's the best at their job and who's not. And it's really not necessarily about their skills or their qualifications. It's actually about what we perceive their identities to be. What happens over time is if we don't interrupt it, we reinforce the implicit bias. And we don't want implicit bias because, right, we're all working to a common goal. And if we don't control or be aware that it might be operating, then we're talking about an inequity that's created. We don't want to do that. So the good news is we can fix this. That's what's so liberating about this. It's not one of these, when we're working with folks and they say, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. How can I stop my bias against people who are different from me and have different life experiences? And then we feel bad about it, and then we start to avoid it. Well, the thing about implicit bias is, in fact, we can rework our neural pathways. And what's so wonderful is I always think about Gabby Giffords, the Arizona Congresswoman, because we know that she was the victim of a tragic shooting, and she wasn't not only expected to live, she wasn't expected to walk or talk or communicate in the ways that we've seen her most recently do at the Democratic National Convention. And she, through music, was able to rewire her neural pathways. So implicit bias is the interplay, or rewriting implicit bias is the ways in which we can rewrite the interplay between our brain pathways and also our cultural conditioning. So how do we get out of this? How do we feel better about this, right? First of all, we let ourselves off from the blame, shame, or guilt, and we say implicit bias is always operating. It's a normal part of human experience. We're always taking in messages. We want to be aware of our own biases. When we're talking about implicit bias and we're maximizing our relationships with the people we work with or work for, we don't want to weaponize it. We don't want to walk up to people and say, oh, your implicit bias is showing. We want to, it's self-patrolling. It's self-reflection. So we acknowledge our own reactions, our own interpretations, our own judgments. And then we start to consciously identify and navigate. So we'll know when implicit bias comes up because we can feel it in our body. We can feel changes in our respiration. We can feel when we start to feel nervous, or our brain starts to feel a little bit addled. So we can interrupt that, and I call that, it's a beat and a breath. We take a deep breath, and often that physical action helps rewire. It also calms us down. Other things we can do is we can replace that stereotype. We can remember, okay, what's happening? I'm feeling a little bit nervous. This is my limbic system going off, so I'm going to move away from that pathway of thinking. I'm going to interrupt it, and I'm going to encourage individuation. I'm also going to think about what is the story. I'm going to learn more about the person I'm working with. I'm going to learn about more about the people that I'm working for. I'm going to encourage to individualize and get them to tell me more about themselves. We also want to practice empathy, right? How would we want to be treated or understood in these situations? We want to be able to critically self-reflect without feeling guilty. We want to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. We also want to, when we're getting nervous, just be okay in being in an uncertain space. I don't like to use the word discomfort because that's not really what's happening. We're just uncertain. So let's be a little more comfortable about that. The other ways we can really easily counter implicit bias, and this is how it makes our life easier, right? Because these are these are techniques and concepts that if we master, if we practice it, it makes our life so much easier, so much calmer, and then we get to know people and we get to really increase our happiness and contentment in our work environment. So we want to pay attention. If we've got some judgments and assessments that are going on, we always want to check what's going on. Is implicit bias operating? We definitely want to challenge if something happens in our gut. If something doesn't feel right, that's often where implicit bias sits. So your gut can be a very useful tool, but we also want to critically analyze. If our gut's telling us something, is bias operating? Are we relating to somebody positively or negatively? On a basis of something that has absolutely nothing to do with their qualifications or their skills, but rather something less productive in ways of maybe it's some aspect of their identity that we either relate to or are repulsed by. Let's understand other people's possible reactions, their interpretations. Let's try and see if other people's perspectives, right? Maybe someone's new or younger, or maybe somebody's had more experience. So instead of being threatened by some knowledge that or perspectives that they share, let's turn to wonder. and interrupt that bias so that maybe we have the opportunity to learn and overcome the hump of uncertainty. Really be intentional in your interactions with people. It can be very empowering. It can be very constructive and extremely productive. The other thing is transparency, friends, right? You're allowed to sort of say, oh, I'm feeling funky, or I'm feeling awkward, or I'm feeling uncomfortable. Are you? And really in humorous and kind and empathic ways, really say, hey, let's work through this. Let's not ignore this. Because if you ignore it, things can fester, or we can create what's known as imagined fictions. And imagined fictions those are the fictions we use to replace the narratives that we don't know. And of course, the other way to undo implicit bias is to practice intergroup contact. Get to know the people, right? Get ourselves in spaces with people that we might not be familiar with. And how do we do that? First and foremost, we can present ourselves, though I wouldn't go up to somebody and say, hey, I'm not used to people like you. I want to interact with you. Maybe we're a little bit more delicate, a little bit more compassionate. We might say something like, I'm very interested in what you say, or what you're thinking, or what you're doing, and really try and reach across those lines. The other thing is do some research. If there's a difference in age, or class, or gender, or sexuality, or even political preference, do a little Googling, do a little research, and school yourself up about these things, because we know that we've been trained things that we don't know about, we get uncomfortable. They trigger our limbic system, and then that will trigger the implicit to explicit bias. So do a little research. Some other things about diversity and the do's and don'ts are, we can't just sort of celebrate people for moments or heroes and holidays. We want to understand how difference is always operating and how it can be operating in a positive and a negative way. And we want to strive for difference to be empowering. We want people not to be tolerated. We want people to be valued. Okay, tolerance, if we think about, oh, I'm tolerating somebody, like if you're tolerating me, that's not really where we want to be. You want to value people for their differences. You don't have to agree with them, but we want to value them. It'll make our lives easier. It may advance our projects. It'll make us much more content in our work environments. Be aware of identity interactions. Be aware of etiquette. Think about how you'd like to be treated. Really move away from stereotypes. Even if you think you're joking with somebody, don't joke with somebody along a stereotype line. That's how we can get ourselves into danger. We think we're joking, we think we're meeting somebody, we think we're expressing some commonality or some solidarity, and sometimes we get into real trouble. So, and also don't belittle somebody because of their difference. Don't sort of say, oh, at my age, or when you've been here this long. Really just avoid the identity and say, here's my experience. Speak from the eye. Be transparent and honest. When you're having interactions, like I said, if you're having discomfort, great, talk about it. But if you're also really comfortable, be empowering, encouraging, and say, I had a great day with you. Build some trust, right? Build and take those moments and encourage the people you're working with. Also be an active bystander. If you see something that's oppressive, that could make someone feel marginalized, feel free to say, whoops, that didn't sound right. Let's try something else. Or you don't have to necessarily be so heavy about it. You can say, oh, I'm sure I didn't hear you right. Maybe even counter it with, oh, let's say if somebody says something ageist or something racist or sexist, say, oh, that's not really how I see women, or that's not how I see young people. I'm so grateful to have young people, or that's not how I see older people in the profession, or that's not how I see people who are not born in the U.S. So be constructive and deliberate, because building that community of trust, eluding or eliminating implicit bias is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So think about the ways in which we also want people not to be silenced because of their gender or their race or some form of their identity. So if someone's not talking, do some work and say, gosh, I'd love to hear from you. Don't let power dynamics operate. If implicit bias may be creating silence, say something to folks and say it in gentle ways. Think about how you'd like to be discussed. You'd like to have this discussed. So things we want to think about, right? Strength lies in the differences with people. It matters, right? Everyone's always trying to find common ground. Well, that's not always possible. And we know in brain science that's not always what we want. We actually benefit from people's different perspectives. So, it's not only about being brave, it's not also about extending kindness to people and making it an inclusive environment. It's also about making things comfortable for you. So with that, I'm going to conclude my formal remarks and see if anybody has any questions for me, and I'd be happy to answer them. So yes, so a question for me is, do I come out and do talks and trainings? Thank you so much. I work for the Winter Institute, which is in Mississippi, and we absolutely do more and more trainings. We do what we like to call community building conversations, because training seems sort of pushed and pressed. But really, in fact, what we want to do is build community, we want to build trust, and we want to make sure that people are maximizing their work environment so that they're happy and content. We also want to not let people get so unhappy that we have a crisis or an incident. So instead, what we like to do is build that community first, so if a crisis or an event happens or difference comes up, that people are more easily able to deal with it and move through that difference. So thanks for the question. That was a great one. Okay, well, thank you so much again. I'm Jen Stolman. I'm with the Winter Institute, and if you have any questions, you would just Google my name and the Winter Institute and come find me. But also, please know that the slides that you see, you are welcome to use them. It's free and open access, and feel free to share with your colleagues and your peers. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Heidi Kessler. Thanks so much, and everybody have a good one.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar today. That was a fantastic presentation, Jen. Thank you very much. All right, so here we are about to launch into Smarter Lunchrooms, small changes that make a big difference. So I want to let you know who I am. I am Heidi Kessler, and I'm the manager of the Cornell Center for Behavioral Economics in Child Nutrition Programs, also fondly known as the Ben Center. We do two things here at the Ben Center. The first thing that we do is conduct research in schools to discover the best way to nudge students to select and consume healthy foods. We want to help schools make sure that they have healthy kids, not just healthy trash cans. The second thing that we do is translate that research into practice in school lunchrooms all across the country through the Smarter Lunchrooms movement. The Smarter Lunchrooms movement helps school lunchrooms nudge choices by using research-based suggestions to guide students to unknowingly, oftentimes, make smarter and healthier choices in the lunchroom. We work to help lunchrooms increase consumption of healthy foods, the target foods that school nutrition folks want kids to be eating more of. We can help increase sales by driving participation. Our strategies allow for the maintenance of choice. We can nudge students without completely eliminating unhealthy choices from the menu or only raising prices on less healthy options. And finally, the changes and the nudges that we recommend are mostly free and sometimes very, very low cost, under $50. In order to help lunchrooms do this, the Smarter Lunchrooms movement provides training, resources, and expert advice. So ultimately, a smarter lunchroom uses research-based strategies to increase healthy eating, participation, and revenue while decreasing waste and preserving choices. Hopefully this resonates as something that a lot of you listening are looking to do in your lunchroom. So I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page about what I'm talking about these evidence-based strategies or these nudges that we recommend. So one such nudge is making half of the milk white and placing it in front of chocolate milk. In some of our studies, we've seen a 40% increase in the number of students selecting white milk just by making this simple change. Another one is putting the fruit in a colorful bowl next to the cash register. You can see a 103% increase in fruit selection just by doing this. Branding. You can brand your whole lunchroom, your whole cafeteria, or you could brand particular items. For example, in one of our studies, we put a sticker of Elmo on some apples and not on other apples. The students that had a apple with an Elmo sticker on it consumed twice as much of their apple than the students that had no Elmo stickers on their apple. So simple branding can make a big difference. And the next one is one of my personal favorites. It's naming the veggies, using creative, descriptive, and age-appropriate names to highlight your vegetables. In one of our studies, students consumed twice as many X-ray vision carrots as they did regular carrots. So how about some supercharged green beans or protein-packed chickpeas? All right, so now you have an idea of the kinds of things that Smarter Lunchrooms encourages. And for this webinar, we're really here to talk about school nutrition staff, so we'll direct our conversation there now. The Smarter Lunchrooms movement engages, empowers, and energizes school nutrition professionals. We hear that school nutrition staff really like Smarter Lunchrooms, and the reason that they like it is because they tell us that it gives them concrete ways to improve the lunchroom atmosphere, such as hanging signs and reorganizing the service line, or even something as simple as getting rid of broken and unused equipment. They love it because the changes are cost-free or very low cost. They're easy. All right, so staff, they don't have to write a grant or appeal to the school board in order to start building a smarter lunchroom. It's something that can be started today or tomorrow. At our training, school nutrition staff quickly learn that the strategies that we're describing will work at home as well as at school. And they come back the next day and they report to us that they put the cereal boxes out of sight and they put fruit out on the counter. And so it's really exciting and energizing when your work can start to cross into your home. And finally, it's empowering. So as school nutrition professionals, as you all well know, there's so many regulations and policies and governed by the federal level, the state level, and even the local level. Sometimes it can feel like there's not a lot of control over what's happening in the lunchroom. And Smarter Lunchroom strategies are things that can be in the control of a cafeteria manager, of a line cook, of a supervisor, of a baker, or a server, or a cashier. They've even have some nice little quotes. One woman, after a Smarter Lunchroom makeover, wrote us an email and said that the kids are really responding to the changes that she's made. Oh, we can do that was a response I had at a training from a person who was really pretty reticent to be hearing these suggestions and to come to this training feeling like she was doing everything that could be done and that this was going to be just more work. And when we described to her what Smarter Lunchroom strategies were, she said, oh, we can do that. And then finally, someone sent us an email and just says, I've seen such a difference since we did a Smarter Lunchroom makeover. So one thing that we touch on when talking to school nutrition staff, right when they're about to begin a Smarter Lunchroom makeover, is their influence, the staff's influence over student selection and consumption. There's one particular nudge that we recommend called suggestive selling. And suggestive selling works because attitudes are contagious. We want to make eye contact with students, and we want to project that healthy foods are cool. Verbal prompts can influence us to see and desire products. So here's some great verbal prompts here on the screen. Now you can say, you have to take a fruit or vegetable. That's not a reimbursable meal. It's not my fault. Don't shoot the messenger. Or you can say, hey, how about taking an apple for later? Or a fruit comes with your meal today. One of my personal favorites is, free milk with lunch today. Yeah, well, it's, free every day, but marketing it in this fun and exciting way can make a difference. Or how about, would you like some salad with that pizza? So here's some ideas for suggestive selling. Now what else? What about a really simple smile? What does a smile do? So most of us probably know that a smile is contagious, right? You've probably heard that before. When somebody smiles at you, you just kind of automatically smile back. It's what our brains are wired to do. Research shows that a smile leads to a better customer service experience. We know that somebody who is smiling is more approachable than somebody who's not. A simple smile can boost creativity, and of course, It's free. All right, so I think we should take a moment now and have everybody smile. So there's over 200 people listening to this call. I want to feel 200 radiating smiles coming through the phone. It's feeling pretty good, but I think there are still some frowns out there. Okay, now I'm feeling the smiles. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so that's nice. A smile can do these things. But can a smile impact school lunch sales? Researchers at the Cornell Center for Behavioral Economics and Child Nutrition Programs, the Ben Center, set out to answer this question by using survey data where students were asked if the school lunch staff always smiled, often smiled, sometimes smiled, or never smiled. Okay, then based on those responses, we calculated the percentage of students purchasing a school lunch. Let's take a look at the results. So, of the group, all the way on the left, that said that those lunch service staff always smiled, 73% of those students purchased a school meal. And all the way on the right, of the group that said that the staff never smiled, only 66% of those students bought lunch. So, okay, a few percentage points. Does this make a financial difference? So let's play it out in a hypothetical situation, all right? Let's take 2 school districts, and let's pretend that each of these school districts have 2,500 students. So based on the results from this data, if the school lunch staff were always smiling, 73% or 1,825 students would purchase lunch. And if the staff at the other district never smiled, according to this data, only 1,650 students would purchase a lunch. A school lunch costs $2.50. This would be a difference of $437.50 in revenue every single day. And over the course of a 180-day school year, this equals $78,750 in revenue, a substantial amount of money. I like to call it the $75,000 smile. Now, I definitely need to say at this point that this is a major oversimplification, and we have to recognize that these results are purely correlational. This scenario might not hold true for an actual district with 2,500 students, but based on research in retail settings, we know that a smile is powerful and can improve the customer's experience and ultimately increase revenue. All right, so now I hope that I have convinced you that smarter lunchrooms are fun and easy to do, and I hope I've showed you a couple ways that it engages staff and that they like it and that it's an excellent way to keep them motivated and engaged in their workplace. I want to tell you a little bit about the steps to a smarter lunchroom makeover. So we're introducing this 4-step path: spot it, plan it, do it, prove it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about each of them. So before you make any changes to your lunchroom, you've got to figure out what the heck you want to do, right? So you do that by spotting the changes, and you take a Smarter Lunchroom scorecard, which is an awesome tool. It's our premier tool that we have available on our website at smarterlunchrooms.org. And then you also take photos. All right, so you might think, why would I take photos? I'm in my cafeteria every single day. Well, you take photos because they can help reveal things that your brain filters out on a daily basis. All right, so using the scorecard to see what nudges you're already doing and taking some photos to see what looks good and what can be improved will help you spot what you can change. Then you make a plan. Maybe there's a ton of things to change. We recommend that you just choose a couple, depending on how big they are. Maybe 3 changes is a good number to start with. And you want to make a plan. You want to think about, okay, how are we going to make this change? We're going to put fruit by the cash register now. How are we going to do that? What kind of bowl is it going to go in? Where are we going to get the bowl? Do we need $5 to go buy a bowl? Who do we need to train to tell them that that's where the bowl goes and to put the fruit in it? So you can make a really simple plan all the way to a more complicated plan of we are now introducing a salad bar and all the planning that goes into that. Then the next step is to do it. You execute your plan. The best way to get something done is to do it. All right, so you execute your plan. And the last step is prove it, and that's where you show your successes. All right, and that's a great ways to show your successes are to complete the Smarter Lunchroom scorecard again to see how your score has improved and to take some post photos so you have pre and post photos to share. All right, so that was a really quick and simple overview of our four-step path. We have more detailed information about each step and how to make it happen on our website. So how can you get your staff interested in this? How can you motivate them? They probably already have really full plates, or you yourself already have a really full plate, and is this taking on another huge project? Well, something that I think is really nice is that as school nutrition staff, you can own this process. Again, you don't have to go to the school board. You don't have to write a grant. This can be your project and your process, and you can take it as far as you want, or you can just dabble if that's what you want. I recommend to managers and directors to find the artist in the group and to find the person who can come up with all the funny names. There's usually one or two in each kitchen. We are not all blessed with the ability to come up with all these creative descriptive names, as I have seen, but in the trainings that I've been at, there's always a few people that percolate and it just starts rolling off their tongue, supercharged green beans and superhero spinach and crazy kale and super sweet spuds. So find that person, engage them. Find the person that likes to decorate and art, to do the posters and to do the whiteboards or the bulletin boards. Maybe they don't want to be in the planning, but maybe they like to do the creative side of things. And finally, empower staff to allow them to choose what strategies that they want to do. So there's tons of Smarter Lunchroom strategies. And a really great way is to pass ownership along and let the kitchen staff choose the strategies that they want to do themselves. My last tip is to think about what saying thank you to your staff look like. We all feel appreciated by different things. Okay, so one staff member who goes and does a tremendous amount of changes or reorders the service line, they might really appreciate being called into the cafeteria during lunchtime and given a round of applause by the students. Public recognition, right? But that might be another employee's worst nightmare. Don't put me in front of everybody with all eyes on me. That would be awful. They might prefer something like a simple thank you. Some people really love flowers, and some people are like, why are you giving me something that's going to die in a week? All right? Some people might think it's really cool to have a dish named after them. Or what else is it that would encourage and motivate and help your staff feel appreciated? If you're in a position of leadership, think about what it is that you can provide your staff and then try to find out what it is that will make them feel the most valued. Because ultimately what we want is healthy, happy kids with happy school nutrition staff. Like this pretty photo, except for all the perfectly white shirts, it's probably a little unrealistic, but the smiles, I think, are a worthy goal. So that's the end of my presentation, and I would be happy to take comments and questions. Please visit us at smarterlunchrooms.org. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. You can also reach me at the Ben Center at ben@cornell.edu. So I think I'll pause now, and I'll keep my eye on the chat box in case anybody has any questions. Oh, this is a great question, asking if there is a forum for school nutrition professionals to share success stories, brainstorm ideas, or network online about the profession. So we are in the process of developing a listserv for school nutrition folks to be connecting on just these topics that you have mentioned. We have some good names being offered here. Let's see, Rockin' Bee Rockoli. I like that. And Cool as a Cucumber are suggested by this person. So that's excellent. So yeah, stay tuned to smarterlunchrooms.org on our Facebook page, and you'll see announcements about our listserv in the coming months. I also want to welcome people to submit their success stories to that email address, ben@cornell.edu, and I funnel them on over to the Facebook page to get promoted. And the Facebook page is also actually another place where you could type in your success stories and let us know what you're doing. So here's a question about keeping staff continually engaged. Is there a Smarter Lunchrooms reboot? That's a good question, and there's not necessarily a reboot per se, but you would just redirect to the next category. So maybe folks were really excited at first and really focused on fruit, and were able to demonstrate increased consumption and selection of fruit, and are feeling really good about that. And then things kind of peter off, and Smarter Lunchroom slowly ends up in the background. One way to motivate them is to direct them to or nudge them towards a different category of the scorecard. How about signage? How about communication, vegetables, or milk? We also have videos that regularly being developed, new training materials regularly coming out. We have a fantastic resource called No Time to Train, which are 15-minute lunchroom lessons, lunchroom training lessons that can be done with staff. So be sure to check that out online under resources. You'll find both the script and the PowerPoint presentations, which are in PDF form for folks to use with their staff. So check that out. That's a nice little reboot that you could use. So I think that is, oh yes, it's true. Meal Talk has also been brought up as a great place for sharing ideas and questions. That might include Smarter Lunchrooms or might be broader, but certainly if you are a school nutrition professional, I hope you are on Meal Talk as well. All right, well that is all the questions. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for sending me a big smile through the phone, and I'm going to pass it off to the next person.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Heidi and Jennifer, for the great presentations. I am Tekla Coleman-Sloan, and I'm with USDA Food Nutrition Service. I am a nutritionist. And as Heidi touched on earlier, all of the regulations and policies that are coming out, it kind of makes you feel like you're not in control. And today, I just wanted to take a brief moment and go over some final rules that were released, and to remind you of the resources that are available, just to help you kind of remember what they were about, or if you're new, to help you understand what the rules are about. And just an FYI, always your first place of reference regarding final rules will be your state agency. USDA F&S provides the requirements and the options for the final rules, but it's at the state's discretion as to how the rules are implemented. States determine when and how the required portions of the final rules are implemented. And with regard to optional portions of the final rule, states, again, have the final decision as to whether any optional provisions will be implemented. So again, just please check with your state agency, and also states, as a reminder, can always check with the regional office for additional guidance. So in July, we were excited to see 4 final rules released: Smart Snacks in Schools, Local School Wellness Policy, Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP, and the final rule for administrative review. Webinars and conference calls have taken place to provide overviews of the 4 final rules, and there will definitely be more over the coming weeks and months. So, as many of you are aware, the 4 final rules are important provisions of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, and it builds on the progress schools across the country have already made to improve the nutritional quality of meals. The rules are implemented to promote integrity across programs. So starting off with Smart Snacks in Schools. This aligns the nutritional quality of snacks sold to children during the school day with science-based improvements made to school lunches and breakfasts over the last 5 years. The Smart Snack standards were implemented in the 2014-2015 school year in accordance with the interim rule, and that's what everyone has been operating under for the last 5 years. The final rule makes modest improvements to those standards based on public comments and lessons learned from implementation. So what changed between the interim and the final? There's a retention of the provision related to the standard for total fat that was in the interim rule. That's going to be open for further comments So whenever you see the opportunity, if you want to comment, please do so. The final rule adds a specific exemption to the total fat and saturated fat standard for eggs and modifies the exemption of the general standards for canned vegetables to exempt low sodium and no salt added vegetables with no added fat to more closely align with USDA food standards and the industry production standards. So here's a quick reminder about foods and beverages sold in schools that need to meet the Smart Snack standards. Any foods and beverage sold to students at school during the school day, other than those provided as part of the school meal program. Examples include a la carte items sold in the cafeteria, food sold in school stores, snack bars, and vending machines, and food and beverages sold during fundraisers, unless these items are not intended for consumption at school or otherwise exempt by your state. And again, the school day is defined as the midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the school day. Here's a snapshot of the USDA FNS page that deals with Smart Snacks. You can check out this website for more details about Smart Snacks. The slides, as Heidi said and Jennifer said, they will be available after the webinar, so you can get the address from there. Also, there's a wealth of other resources from our partners and state agencies, and that's found on the Healthy Meals resource system. Again, the web address is below. From the Healthy Meals resource system, you can access a few states with resources dedicated to Smart Snacks. Do not ever feel like you have to start from scratch or reinvent the wheel. Look at what other states are doing and adapt it to what your needs are. So just Colorado, Idaho, Connecticut, Georgia, I think that's Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. So take a look at what they're doing. This colorful booklet also provides an overview of Smart Snacks, and it was recently released, and it tells you if a food or beverage meets the requirements. This is a ready-to-go resource for anyone who oversees the sale of foods or beverages to students on the school campus during the day. Right now, it's available for download. Printed copies are expected to be coming out in September. Again, that's the link to where you can download the actual copies. And once you turn to the inside of the book, if you check any of these questions, such as you coordinate school fundraisers, you manage a school store or snack bar, sell food during the school day on campus, manage vending machines, or you just want healthier foods in your school campus, this guide is definitely for you. In addition to the new guide on Smart Snacks, there's a teen nutrition brochure that provides ideas to use healthy choices for fundraising. And it talks about selling non-food items or foods that meet the Smart Snacks nutrition standards. There are 4 success stories about fundraising. So check out the brochure to get some ideas, and it's available for download. If you're new to school nutrition or Smart Snacks, I would encourage you to go back to the ICN website. You have to use the old address, the NFSMI. But if you go there, there is a webinar that came out in October, and it talks about Smart Snacks. The link is below. All you have to do is click on the link to hear the webinar. Moving on. So to local school wellness policy final rule. All school districts participating in the federal school meals program were required to establish local school wellness policies by school years 2006 and 2007. The local wellness policy final rules empowers communities to take an active role in the health of their children. It requires schools to engage parents, students, and community members in the annual development and assessment of school wellness policies. These policies guide a school district's efforts to establish school environments that support healthy eating and physical activity. States and local communities will have flexibility in developing a policy that works for them. I won't go over the details, but I would encourage you to take a look. On the Healthy Meals Resource System, you will find steps to develop a model policy. This was developed by the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, but if you look at the web page here, it talks about the first step, the background information. Then it talks about the case for wellness policy and how you assemble a team and model language for that policy. And then how to assess the needs assessment, the monitoring, the evaluation. Is what you're doing working? And also reporting those successes to the public. So again, that's on the Healthy Meals Resource System, and the web address is below. Another resource that you want to check out is putting local school wellness policies into action, stories from districts and schools. This is from the CDC. So CDC and USDA work together to develop a collection of stories that highlight districts and schools that have successfully implemented components of the wellness policy. There are 11 stories featured, and it shows the steps to taken to implement various aspects of their policy. The web address is below. Coming up, if you want to get more information, on tomorrow there will be a Twitter chat. Moms Rising and the Center for Science and Public Interest is hosting a local school wellness policy Twitter chat. So you can use hashtag FoodFry or hashtag School Wellness. On September 7th, there will be a webinar, and it's going to be new school year, new guidance. Let the Healthy Schools program be your guide to updating your wellness policy. And that, again, that's put on by the Alliance for a Healthier Generation. CDC is going to be on there, as well as our own team nutrition staff. So I would encourage you to sign up for that. Just quickly, going over the community eligibility provision. This allows schools and local educational agencies with high poverty rates to provide free breakfast and lunch to all students to promote access to healthy food and reduce the administrative burdens on schools and families. The final rule streamlines the administrative processes, making it easier to participate in the meal program. More than 18,000 schools in high poverty areas currently participate in CEP, which is now in the second year of implementation. So that means that 8.5 million students it's no cost. I would encourage you to check out the rules on the community eligibility provision. There are several clarifications. I won't go over them today, but here's the FNS page where you can find more information. Also, I want to point out on that page, on the resource page for CEP, there's a really good fact sheet. If you're working to get CEP implemented and you don't have a lot of time to explain it all, this helpful fact sheet breaks it down, and it's really easy to read. I just want to say that this is a really great provision, as there are a lot of children who are hungry that do not qualify for free or reduced lunch. We call them the working poor. And we do have a high number. So as I've traveled around the country to various team labs, CEP has been the most highly praised provision implemented. All who have implemented it have had a significant increase in school meal participation. So below is the web address if you want to find that fact sheet. Moving on to the administrative review. I just want to encourage you again to take a look at this. The most significant change is that the updated administrative review process combines and updates procedures for two separate reviews, the CRE review and the SMI review. It adds new flexibilities for state agencies such as off-site reviews, evaluates resource management and more in depth, and adds the requirement for state agencies to post the review results online. State agencies will use the updated review process to monitor school lunches and breakfasts, after-school snacks, the fresh fruit and vegetable program, and the special milk program. Again, I won't go into detail, but there are quite a few clarifications that you want to check out. If you need additional assistance, here is another website that's helpful, the Certification of Compliance. Here you can find more information about compliance with the new meal patterns. The web address is below. So why does all of this matter? Why do we want to create healthier meals? I want you to just take a minute and look at this slide. This came from the CDC. And these are the top number, the leading causes of death. And heart disease is number one. But if you look more closely, at least 5 of these have a nutrition-related component. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, and nephrotic syndrome, such as someone with uncontrolled high blood pressure, or the result of complications with diabetes. This is why we do what we do. We want to impact these numbers. We want to lay a foundation for good health while children are young in order to help delay the onset or prevent the onset of these diseases. No, we can't compete with what kids eat outside of school, but for the 6 to 7 hours that we have them, we can impact that time and hopefully help them set really good behaviors that favor good health. And again, this is why. Diabetes, type 1 or type 2, is the most common chronic disease in people younger than 20 years old. That is a very heartening, sad statistic, that diabetes, kids under 20, that this is the most common chronic disease. And we can impact that with school meals. So the policies are not to overwhelm you, but it's to help you implement a healthier school environment and to give you that encouragement and empowerment that you need to do that. With that, I'm going to ask if there are any questions. Someone also pointed out, thank you, that you can also access the webinars that I talked about earlier for Smart Snacks. That's also on the ICN website. So if you were to Google it, you might Google an SMI or the ICN, and you can get to that webinar. So thanks for pointing that out. Are there any other questions? And as I said, there will be more webinars and conferences coming up that will explain this in more detail. Let's see. So the question is, I have people who want to sell fundraiser foods after lunch is over, and is that allowed? So you have that time frame when foods are the competitive foods, when they cannot be sold. So check with your state agency, but there is a time frame when competitive foods cannot be sold during the lunch hour. But the Smarter Snacks will talk about the kinds of foods that can be sold during a fundraiser. But check with your state agency or your SFA to get the exact guidance that you need for the time frame that fundraisers are not allowed to take place. Are there any other questions? Sorry, after lunch. So after lunch they can be. The Smarter Snacks, they must meet the Smarter Snacks requirement. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Liz. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tekla, for that great review. Very helpful information, I'm sure, to our participants. I'll be giving just a brief overview of some of the resources that are available on the topic of human resources. ICN offers several online classes as well as downloadable training materials. You can access our website by visiting www.theicn.org, and there are several ways to navigate our website. If you are interested in an online class, you can see our entire catalog of classes by clicking on the Online Courses tab. You can also search our document library that includes all of our resources, and this is where you will be able to find the downloadable training materials that may be useful with your staff. And I'd like to remind everyone that all of our materials, courses, trainings are all free of charge, so no cost to school districts. Here's an example of what you'll find by clicking on that Online Courses catalog tab. We have classes on various HR topics such as communication skills, dealing with conflict, creating a motivating workplace, and there's one on employee discipline. And our courses are tagged with S&A key areas and professional standards learning codes. The document library houses all of our training documents, and it's one of the easiest ways to access what you're looking for is to search by keywords. For example, if you're looking for something specific, you can check our subject index, which is the second red arrow on my slide, and here once you click that subject index, you'll see that human resource management is one of the topics in that index, and you can go there to quickly access all of our trainings related to human resources. I'd also like to mention that USDA has a website dedicated to professional standards. Many resources related to human resources can be found under the Administration tab. The site also provides a listing of resources by title. It tells who developed it, what format it's in, and if the resource is specific to a certain state. Professional standards learning codes are also included on that site, which is very helpful. And I hope this little overview helped. We like to try to make participants aware of resources available that pertain to the webinar topic and that may be useful in your programs throughout the school year. I'll take any questions if anybody has any. Let's see. There is, somebody asked if there was a cost to ICN trainings, and no, there is no cost. Okay. I think that's going to wrap up our questions. Come on. And I would like to thank all of our panelists today for sharing their expertise. And before we conclude, I would like to give you a few brief announcements. Upcoming state events are planned during September in Colorado, California, Alabama, and Iowa. The next Team Up Thursdays webinar will air on Thursday, September 29th. This webinar will be broadcast entirely in Spanish, and the topic of discussion will be food safety. And the available resources that are in Spanish from ICN and USDA will also be reviewed. And remember that all webinars are recorded and can be viewed on the Team Up for School Nutrition Success website at www.theicn.org/teamup. Snapshots of Team Up events are now available on the site as well. These provide a brief overview of what is happening at Team Up events across the country. Thanks again for your participation, and have a great day.